Discuss the fallout in the U.S. presidential campaign as former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, a possible Trump running mate. Mr. Speaker, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
It's good to be with you.
Donald Trump is drawing parallels between Brexit and his campaign here in the U.S., but that was a vote about a bureaucracy in Brussels, not a choice between two candidates. And also, the number of minority voters is twice as high, about 25% versus 13% in this country as opposed to Great Britain. Aren't there big differences?
Well, there's some significant differences. I would point out, by the way, that the week before, in both Turin and Rome, Reform candidates from a brand new party founded by a comedian won. The first woman elected in the history of Rome in 2,800 years. Won with 65% against all of the traditional parties. So the sense that there's this wave building against the establishment is real. Now, I wouldn't overstate it. And you, frankly, indicated one of Trump's great challenges. He's got to find a way to be as effective in reaching out to all Americans as he is in reaching out to white Americans. If he becomes that effective, there's no reason to believe that mothers in Southside Chicago are happy with the murder rate. It's just they've never had a Republican come in and talk to them about it, show that they cared. There's no reason to believe that people in Baltimore are happy about the murder rate. And I think a Trump who decides to be genuinely concerned about all Americans might get some very surprising responses.
Now, Secretary Clinton tied Brexit to her argument that Donald Trump is unqualified to be president. In a statement she issued, she said this time of uncertainty only underscores the need for calm, steady, experienced leadership in the White House. Your response?
I think it's hysterical. She was wrong on Brexit. She wanted the Remain vote to win. She was wrong on Libya. She thought it would somehow get better if we knocked off Gaddafi. She was wrong on the reset with Russia. I mean, what has she been right about? I mean, if you need more of this kind of experience, it's a little bit like Casey Stengel once asking if anybody at the Mets could play the game. I mean, there's no reason to believe that Hillary Clinton's experiences qualify for anything except retirement.
But isn't there an argument that it's better to be experienced than inexperienced?
An experienced failure? She's experienced at going to Goldman Sachs to make secret speeches for lots of money. They're experienced at having secret meetings while she was Secretary of State. I think 170 have now been unearthed by the Associated Press that were secret meetings with donors. She's experienced at being part of the most corrupt system we've ever seen. But I don't know that that's the kind of experience that this fall is going to work very well.
Now, Clinton tore into Trump this week on the economy the same way that she tore into him on foreign policy last week. Here's a clip.
So let's take a look at what he did for his business. He's written a lot of books about business. They all seem to end at chapter 11.
Given Trump's business record, given the fact that his tax plan, by independent analysis, would add $10 trillion to the national debt over 10 years, doesn't Clinton have plenty to attack when it comes to Trump?
Look, she'll make a lot of allegations, but let me just give you one fact from the Director of National Intelligence. Last year, the estimate by the Director of National Intelligence staff is that the Chinese stole $360 billion in intellectual property. That's twice the total U.S. exports to China last year alone. Now, a Trump who's saying this is the end result of an establishment which basically serves Wall Street and cuts really bad deals for the rest of us. She's now got to come back on the big issues and make the case that their trade policies, their weak economy, and we will probably be in a recession by late summer. And she's got to make the case this is fine. And I agree with Sean Spicer at the RNC. Just the phrase enough with the Hillary H pointing downward may be all you need to win the campaign.
Why do you think there's going to be a recession by summer?
Well, I think if you watch what's happening with the manufacturing, with the various purchasing things, with consumer credit, I mean, consumer confidence. There's been a whole range of things that this is getting slower. I think they just reduced again the estimated growth rate. We're now down to like 1.5% growth rate. And even the head of the Federal Reserve, Yellen, said the other day, the only reason our unemployment looks like it does is because we've had such a radical drop in the number of people looking for work because they've just dropped out of the economy. Very few normal Americans think this is an acceptable economy. Hillary Clinton thinks this economy is just fine.
Now, Trump also went after Clinton this week, but while she has plenty to hit him on, he has plenty to hit her on. But he also made a number of statements that were were just false, and I want to put some of them on the screen. He said she wants totally open borders. She doesn't. He said she wants to spend hundreds of billions to resettle Middle Eastern refugees. The total refugee budget for the U.S. is $1 billion, and then he said this.
Among the victims of our late ambassador, Chris Stevens, I mean, what she did with him was absolutely horrible. He was left helpless to die as Hillary Clinton soundly slept in her bed.
Now, Mr. Speaker, you can certainly argue about how Hillary Clinton handled Benghazi, but the fact is the attack happened at 3 or 4 in the afternoon here in Washington, and she was working it late into the night. As I say, there's plenty to attack her on, but why not stick to the facts?
Well, first of all, I've had different people say different things about what she did that night and what her instructions were.
Second, she wasn't asleep, is the point.
Okay, but she certainly...
Maybe she should have been, but she wasn't.
Okay. I think there are going to be a lot of things that people can argue about that Trump says and a lot of things people can argue about that Hillary says. But the objective fact is there were over 600 requests for security from Libya. Now, that number came from the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, not from Donald Trump. They were ignored. The fact is that in the end, there was no effective effort to respond. The fact is she clearly lied about why it occurred. And again, you had families of the people who were killed who say she lied to them. So I think this is a debate. They can get into details of picking a fight with Donald Trump. This is a debate I think they're not going to win, because on the larger framing of the debate, the country's overwhelmingly going to be with Trump. And frankly, the degree to which the news media has bent over backwards, Hillary Clinton is certainly for the equivalent of open borders. She wants to legalize 11 million people who are already here. She has no.
But that doesn't mean that she wants open borders for everybody else to come in.
But she's opposed to a wall. She's opposed to a fence. She's opposed to being effective at controlling it. She wants at least 85,000 Syrian refugees now, and who knows how many more she'll want after the election. So to suggest somehow that she's really for a controlled immigration policy, I think defies everything we know about her and her appointees.
All right. On a trip this weekend to Scotland, Trump seemed to flip on 2 of his major policies. I'm going to talk about both of those. He now says he wants to ban Muslims only from what he calls terror states. Not all Muslims, as he said before. And he said he doesn't consider mass deportations part of his immigration plan. Mr. Speaker, question. What does Trump stand for?
I think he stands for an evolving process of trying to come to grips with really big problems.
But does evolving mean that what he said last week doesn't stand this week?
It may evolve as the facts evolve and as he learns more. I mean, this is a guy who was never in public policy until June of last year. And over the last year, he has learned a great deal. Sometimes he's been flat wrong, and you know I've been very tough on your show when I thought he was flat wrong. And he has changed things as he's learned more. He'll keep changing. But the core direction difference is enormous. He does one. By the way, I would apply a test for Sharia and a test for loyalty to ISIS rather than a geographic test, because we're finding people all over the world who are dangerous to us. So it's pretty hard to say which countries really are the Islamic terrorist countries. But I do think you'll find most Americans, and we released a poll on this Friday, most Americans would like to see a much tougher and tighter view of how you deal with terrorism. And Trump, while the details may be evolving, the details are evolving still in the same direction of how do we get a grip on this thing.
The Supreme Court, on a tie vote this week, blocked President Obama's executive action that would have deferred deportation for millions of people into this country, illegally. Won't that mobilize Hispanic voters who are already against Trump to turn out in even greater numbers to register and vote?
It might, but I think it's also a fair thing to say that the whole issue of the next Supreme Court justice massively mobilizes everybody who cares about the Second Amendment. And historically in America, that's been a very decisive factor in winning a lot of elections. So I think the court, on balance, will turn out to be for Trump. I also think Trump has, in the next 60 days, has to develop a very aggressive program reaching out to Hispanics who are here illegally and reaching out to them on economic issues and education issues. And he's frankly not dramatically worse off today than Mitt Romney was at this stage. So there's no...
Mitt Romney lost by 44 points.
Right. But my point is there is a base there to grow from. that's about a quarter of the Hispanic community, and if he can grow from that, he may be much more competitive than people think.
But when you continue to talk about a wall, when you hit the Mexican-American judge in Trump University, when you talk, well, we'll see what he says now about deportations, pretty hard to get in the door with Hispanic voters, isn't it?
Well, I think, first of all, the wall is about national security, and I think legal American citizens, whether Hispanic or otherwise, when they look at things like Orlando, are very concerned about national security.
Two more questions I want to get in. Both campaigns filed reports this week on where they stand, and the contrast was shocking. As of June 1st, Trump had $1.3 million cash on hand and $69 on the payroll. Clinton had $42.5 million and 685 staffers. Mr. Speaker, you can't run a national campaign with that kind of staff and money that Trump has.
And they know that, and they're staffing up. And Paul Manafort is right now adding more and more people. But the thing that's funny about all this, we could have had that exact chart on January 1st about Jeb Bush and Donald Trump. Jeb had a bigger operation. He had a heck of a lot more money. He was going to buy a whole lot more TV ads, and he disappeared. You just watched Turnberry, Scotland, and once again, Trump got, 40 minutes of free television time? So you have to add in earned media value plus the campaign, and he just paid off $50 million in campaign debt by writing a check. I mean, Hillary could probably afford to do that, but I don't have any hunch that Hillary's going to give up any of her personal money when Wall Street's willing to fund her.
Oh, boy. All right. Finally, you liked that, didn't you?
I liked that.
All right. Anyway, finally, every time you're here, we play the running mate game. And you always say, I'm better than that. No, I'm not. Here's my question this time.
You even preempted my comment.
Here's my question this time. Are you being vetted? You have not submitted any information.
No, nobody's called me. Nobody said, would you like to be? Nobody said, would you be willing to be considered? Nobody said anything.
Well, given the fact that we're 3 weeks away, what does that say to you?
He's probably going to start thinking about it about 2 days before Cleveland.
Are you serious?
Yes, I think Donald Trump does not want to make a decision until the convention. I think that he's a very decisive person, and in the case of a few of us, I'm an example, there's not much vetting to do. I mean, you guys have been all over me for a decade.
The good, the bad, and the ugly,
That's
right?
Exactly right. It's all out. All you got to do is Google.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thanks for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, sir.
Great to be here.